Educational Video Series, The Art of War, Kenpo style. So today, I'm going to reference 3 publications. They are Mr. Parker's The Zen of Kenpo, Meaningful Quotes from the Teachings of Ed Parker. All right, that's first. That's about 50 years ago, maybe less. The second one is the Book of 5 Rings with Miyamoto Musashi, one of the greatest swordsmen, and his thoughts on training. And finally, the last one that's from 2,500 years ago, which is probably a required reading assignment when you're in any kind of business school or military institution, called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Mr. Parker talks about, on page 15 of his book, he said, combat wisdom, which I'm going to read from it. He said, what is truth for one may not be truth for another. The real truth for both lies in the moment of actual combat. So that is the truth, is the moment of actual combat. And then, as we had last time, to hear is to doubt, to see is to be deceived, but to feel is to believe. So that's our basic premise for Mr. Parker. Being concerned and asking the right questions and making sure you have a plan so that when you're confronted with the situation, through all your training, you'll be able to have the proper response. In other words, the proper response is based on the attack that is coming at you. So with that, let's go to the second publication. And that one is from Mr. Musashi. And it's here. And he says in this, which is important, he says, the Book of 5 of Fire describes the importance of knowing the difference between using a bamboo practice sword and a real sword in combat. So the difference, true moment of truth, that's a relationship to the last quote by Mr. Parker. The last quote I'm going to give you is from Sun Tzu, okay? And he says, he who knows these things and in fighting puts his knowledge into practice will win his battles. He who knows them not, nor practices them, will surely be defeated. So think of the 3 quotes I just gave you. And let's talk about
Mr. Conatser,
real quick. Talk to me about the web of knowledge. Why is that essential to us?
Well, the web of knowledge was just a layout of the techniques in terms of their either degree of danger. You know, a grab is, like I say, just a regular move. I mean, we've also talked about, you know, expanding on that, like a grab and a tackle. Mr. Parker said the tackle is nothing more than a moving grab, but I have issues with a tackle and a push. If push is the second category, a tackle is like a push, but sometimes it's more violent or more aggressive. So I think there even could be another category out of there, which would include tackles. So as you go from grabs and tackles, which Mr. Parker puts out, I would sit there and go grabs, pushes, then tackles. You know, then you have punches, which actually are causing you further damage. Then you got kicks, which are a stronger weapon and a more dangerous weapon. There's more damage with a stronger, you know, appendage. Hugs and holds can be, once again, they're encapsulating moves and restricting, hindering moves that make things more difficult to get out of. And depending on, I mean, a hug or hold could be not only hindering, but it could be prepping for more mayhem with particularly multiple opponents and getting out of. Then you got locks and chokes, which are the next category, which are possible death moves or more damaging, where you could break an arm or such. Grabs, tackles, pushes, punches, kicks, hugs, holds, locks, chokes. Then, of course, there's weapons, which are gun, knives, and clubs, basically. And those are general categories, but a pencil could be within the realm as well, or anything else you could put in your hand.
That you could ask John Wick on that. So, Jamie, so it's really, it comes down to what is the intent of your opponent's action towards you? Bottom line is, hey, don't say that to my girlfriend and he pushes you. Okay. If he grabs you, I would think there is a more serious intent there, because now he's made contact and he's not letting go. okay, versus a push. It's not really a punch and it's not a grab, but it's an intent. Hey, you know, you see that with kids a lot. You know, let's look at it from a child's point of view. I went to last night. I went to the pumpkin patch with my son. He's 5 years old, and it's amazing how when little kids get together and they get into the jumper area where they're inside the inflatables and they chase each other and they push each other and they roughhouse a little bit, but they're not intending to hurt one another. They're just going through social lessons of how to interact with one another. And it's not that way. But with adults, it's a different game. Am I right on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of this, you know, leads me to thinking, you know, and this is how I teach verbal, physical, psychological assessment of the situation. So I don't know, you're a female, it's dark at night, a big, strong, heavier person walks towards you. Unless you're able to create boundaries, I really believe this, boundaries mean everything, because so many times people are attacked and they didn't know they were going to get attacked until they were hurt. So they didn't understand to create the boundary. So what I would say to a female is, I would say, you know, if you say stop and that person just keeps walking towards you, you know what their intention is, and it's not a good one. So at least you're able to now deal with the situation knowing that they're coming at you, rather than what do I do? What do I do? I freeze and then they put their hands on you. So I think creating verbal, psychological, and physical boundaries are everything. Just like if, you know, we all know this, but, you know, size and strength matter as well. So, I mean, a female is at a party and someone's coming on to the person, maybe they're under the influence of alcohol. If all they've been taught is gouge the person's eyes out, poke them in the eye, and knee them in the groin, the chances are they won't do that. And then what will happen is the person gets their hands on the female, and then we got a bad situation. But if they were able to create a boundary and space and understand distance management, at least they're more prepared.
I see. Jason, how do you deal with teaching a female and understanding what Jamie just said about boundaries? How do you help them to understand? Because it goes back to the beginning of this whole conversation an hour ago. You train with the practice sword, then you have the real sword. But if you don't practice and understand that this confrontation is going to happen and you're not prepared for it and you devoid yourself of the emotional aspect of it, you're going to have a problem.
Right. I agree.
How do you bring that your female students out of that shell?
Well, I actually have once a month. I actually have a women's self-defense class that's been an ongoing for, gosh, I think probably 1.5 to 2 years now. And I have a constant rotation of women who come in because they just sign up. It's limited to 8, and then whoever's first come, first serve. One of the things that I always tell them is to listen to their intuition. If they see that something's going to be a bad situation, to try to avoid it at all costs, if they can. But when somebody's in front of them, I tell them to put their hands up in a defensive type of posture with their hands up. And then hopefully they can de-escalate that situation from there. But if it doesn't, then we've got, focus mitts out, focus pads, kicking shields, and whatnot. And I just work key necessities: knees, elbows, eye gouges, front kicks, and things like that if the inevitable happens. But the biggest key I think I'll spin off to is using their intuition to know, hey, this is going to escalate. I have to do something. I have to react, and it's better to be preemptive in striking than to have to back up and let them get the first move, or worse.
I see. Do you ever use the principle of equation formula?
In my regular classes, yes.
So explain how you use it.
Well, for instance, inserting the eye slice to a technique, per se, or just an eye poke or something along those lines, kicking somebody in the knee before trying to do an actual technique. So if somebody's looking straight on at you, eye to eye, they might not see a side kick to the knee or a foot stomp to, the foot, or something along those lines.
Are you familiar with volume 5?
Yes.
Okay. In chapter 7, he's talking about determining the choice of action. So is that what you're alluding to?
I guess per se, yes. But when I go obviously a lot more in depth with my standard classes than the women's self-defense classes, where I go in through and do a bunch of different types of ideas and concepts on that. But yeah, we will prefix stuff. Like for instance, I might try to insert the freestyle techniques and graft them into our self-defense techniques as well. I actually do that quite a bit to get people used to, hey, if my back is to a wall and, taking those obscure zones like we were just talking about, where you can't go right or left, you only have one choice, and that's to go through somebody, give an idea, a concept of several movements from the freestyle techniques, try to get somebody to move back. So that way you have a little bit more room. And then if they come into a counterattack, well, then you move into your self-defense techniques from there.
Let's move over to Todd. I want to ask you a question regarding what I just asked Jason about, and it was under chapter 7, determining your choice of action. And in page 99, he's talking about you can prefix it, you can suffix it. I'm going to read just the terms. You can insert, you can rearrange it, you can alter it, you can adjust, you can regulate, or you can delete. Can you walk us through what those mean and how they're used?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the equation formula, right? Basically, what it boils down to is you're making something work for the right now. So, and you have to do what you have to do. If delayed sword, if you got let's just go with delayed sword. He grabs the person, he or she, grabs you violently with the intent of punching you with the other hand, because that's what the technique really is about, in my opinion, or that's how I teach it. So they grab you and go to throw with the other hand. You don't have an opportunity to do the inward block. You delete that and you go to the extended outward block for the incoming punch, and then go to your front kick. So what you've done is you've deleted one move, inserted another move, or rearranged into or grafted into Sword of Destruction, and handled the situation. You could do any number of things from that point or position, but that's one small example of how you would use an insert, a delete, or a prefix, or a suffix, or grafting.
Do you ever ask your students to give you variations instead of just one? Do you say, what's going to happen if I do this? We initially start with our base move.
Absolutely. We do that as a drill. Again, like I was saying earlier, talking about drilling. So we may have a delayed sword drill where we're going to work delayed sword, and we're going to work it for, okay, we're going to do the traditional or ideal phase of the technique. Then we're going to move into the what if. And we're going to do 5 or 6 different what ifs, and they're going to have to figure something out.
Do you ever try to break it down? See, I do that with all my students. I give them I call it the base move, because it's like a workbook problem. You learn 1 + 1 equals, then you go 1 + 1 + 1 equals, then you got 1 + 1 + 2 - 3. You start going like that, and you start making it what is the important thing, to think. Do you ever break it down? Normally, the situation is confrontational. I can't speak for anybody else here, but in the short times that I've ever been in bars, and I'm dodging beer bottles at the chicken screen, you get in a situation where it's mostly a pushing, shoving kind of situation, unless it becomes a free-for-all. How do we segue, Jamie, into understanding how to take the grab technique or the attempted grab technique now into a fighting response? How do you get the student to recognize that? Because most of them fall into this scenario that I got a round peg and it goes into a round hole, but now all of a sudden you turned it around and now it's a square hole. how do I make it work?
Yeah, so what I would say is, the beginning stages, I think, especially have someone coming in and they can only make it in once per week. I mean, you can what if them to death. So the beginning stages, I try to drill them on the base techniques over and over and over. And I don't think there's any magical belt, experience, how often they train, how often they practice. And you can see, okay, they're really understanding now these base techniques, be it the yellow, the orange, or whatnot. And then you say, okay, delayed swords for a grab, and they try to shove you back. You clear the arm, you kick the groin, you hand sword. What happens if they don't get their hands on you? They're trying to grab you. You can stop it before that grab occurs. Because, like I said, when someone grabs you, the way I see it is you were lucky because you didn't allow that distance management to kick into play. You let the person grab you, and that could have been a finger to the eye. That could have been a punch to the nose, and the fight's over, and your Kenpo didn't work. That's how I view it. So as they're progressing and you're seeing that knowledge base increase and they're getting greater mastery of the technique, then I'll say, okay, try not to let the grab occur in the first place, and let's pick up the pace. The person trying to grab you, you stop them before the grab occurred, and then kind of do that with a lot of your techniques.
Derek, you've had the luxury, that's a good word, the luxury of training with Frank Trejo. You understand where I'm going to go with this. Frank was always just get on the mat and come at me. It was the way it was because that's life. Now, sure, he wouldn't just throw that at us and say, okay, what are you going to do? We worked our basics. We segued from basics in the division of the arts to the second phase, which is self-defense techniques. And then he would show you how that self-defense technique would work in freestyle. Help us to understand how you use that.
How I use that? Well,
you don't know what's coming at you, sir. You're at one of your photo shoots at a rock concert.
One of the best teaching methods I've ever had is you want to see what real life's like? Go step into a mosh pit of Slaughter to Prevail or stand in the middle of a wall of death and see what happens. Because I promise you, you'll know that you're going to get hit and hurt, but you're not going to know what angle it's coming at you at. Everything in any form or style of martial art is hypothetical. It's hypothetical. It's all an ideal situation and phase. It's until we put it into real practice, and I can hear Uncle Frank saying, just hit him! You know what I mean? That's what he was about, flesh meeting flesh. You can sit there and we can talk about the what ifs, but until you're put in that position, and just jumping back for a second, what I like to teach, especially having a young daughter, and I used to also, like Jason, offer free classes to women and children, and I did that for almost 2 years, once a week, and it was anybody could come and show up. But the number one thing to teach people is environmental awareness. So many people, and some of you guys probably do this with your students and some may not, is one of the first things that we teach them or show them is, okay, you just walked into a room, now close your eyes and tell me what the person next to you is wearing. They don't pay attention to that. So it's just that comes down into breaking down. Can they identify somebody? Can they report somebody's height, what they're wearing, color of clothes, all the other important things to identify a person? Then identify what the threat is. Then you get into the what if phases of things. And then that only goes so far as to if you have on a cup, and as other people have mentioned, pulling out the focus mitts and the pads and actually letting them get their hands onto something, it's all a big what if and hypothetical. Mm-hmm. And if they're not trained, and if they don't sit there and drill and drill and drill and drill and drill or have these basics, they have a false sense of security. So it's our jobs to really instill on them and give them the mindset to think more than anything.
Think. Keyword.
Think. Use your mind, but also be very, very conscious of your environment. And I just like to note that Master Uncle Huck is on here, and as he would say a long time ago, if you want to learn how to fight, go pick a fight.
Well, that's not hard to do. Try to pick up a girl in a bar. There's something interesting will be. It's funny. Jamie brought it up earlier, and I'm going to quote from Mr. Parker's book that was published after his death. So let's keep it in context here, folks. This writing came out after he died. These are probably an assembly of notes and thoughts that were concepts and terms used in here. He said the zones of sanctuary, dead areas of space where you can position yourself for protection. That's an easy one. And I'll use it in the context of what Jamie was talking about with the young females, what Jason was talking about with his female students, what Mr. White had talked about some of the beginning students. We have this sense as we revert to being children that we have protection when we're in an area defined as a sanctuary. And that could be your house. That could be inside your car. That could be in a business. It could be with your best friend, Jamie. I'm standing with you, and I feel so comfortable. I'm not worried because I'm with Jamie, and Jamie's going to make sure nothing's going to happen to me. And I referred last night that my son was with me. He's 5 years old, and we went to the pumpkin patch, and he got to do a bunch of things. The one thing he tried to do is to impress me with his new friend. They went to the very top of the slide where the adults go, and you get on a knapsack and you slide down. So he went up there with a young kid, 6, and George is 5, to impress Daddy and say, I can do this. And he got up there, and Derek, he freezed. He freezed. I knew something was wrong. I knew something immediately was wrong. That sanctuary was no longer there. Fear had entered his mind. And he was up there for over a minute, maybe a minute and a half. So Daddy had to go up to the top after having words with the attendant at the bottom, say, I'm going up there, and I don't care. I got to figure this out. Got up there, grabbed a knapsack, and I rode down with him. And all of a sudden, his fear dissipated. Why? Because sanctuary was there for him. And that's the thing that we have to think about with loved ones and our own self, to be with blinders off, eyes open, understanding where we're at and what we're doing. And once we're there, we have to have a mindset that, one, we're going to survive. Otherwise, we die. Survival or death. That's the only two options that are going to happen if you're in a bad place. Then you have to make that commitment that I'm either going to engage, like Jamie was saying, like Derek was saying, like Todd was saying, or I'm going to leave. I'm going to engage or I'm going to leave. And then the only other thing left over on that situation, very simply, is execution. Mr. Durgan, talk about some more about the choices that we have when we look at determine your choice of action in the equation formula in a page 97 through 101. Okay? Help us to understand that it's the right thought process to think this way and not lock ourselves into a box.
Well, okay, so that comes from practice and execution of those techniques and or working that equation formula or understanding or being put in pressure situations in class. Or I told a story a while back about one of my students is an airline pilot. He was talking with one of his fellow students in class, and I had a folder trainer in my hand as I walked across the room, and he saw me walking across the room, and he looked at me and he looked back away. And of course, now, we're in the classroom environment, and this is supposed to be, I'll use the term, a sanctuary, right? Where we're all safe and everything. And as I got closer to him, I walked up and quickly unfolded the blade and ran it across his throat. And he looked at me very startled, grabbed his throat, and kind of froze for a minute. And so the point was that, and that guy to this day does not let me come within about 6 feet of him with anything. And when he walks in, he looks at my hands, he looks at me, he looks everywhere he can to make sure that nothing's going on. And he looks at all the other students, and he keeps his distance and his space open and able to evade and disengage from whatever it is if he needs to. So anyway, so the pressure testing helps us be more ready emotionally and psychologically for combative situation to either fully engage or disengage and leave.
So the point you're saying is that the pressure testing is when you get to the freestyle aspect of the division of the arts.
Or if you're training, look, so for years and years, and I do this to beginners too, because they need to understand, now I don't hit anybody, but if I'm doing, I've had beginners, you know, they get this gentle grab for delayed sword, and then they go through their technique, you know, or this gentle grab for captured twigs or any of the other techniques. And I will on occasion just grab them and just rattle their cage hard. And I'm a big enough guy that I can do that to any of my students. So, you know, captured twigs, you know, they turn around and they're expecting this, you know, Winnie the Pooh grab, and you just freaking grab them and give them something to work against. And that is very startling for them. I know, because some of them haven't reacted favorably, but that's part of the thing. And my job as the instructor, as a teacher, is to help them be even better prepared for the street. And that means that in a safe environment, I can aggressively attack them and give them a more realistic pressurized scenario than just throwing them out there to pick a fight, as Mr. Hibben would have somebody do.
Hey, at my house, it was like watching the Pink Panther. I'd come in late, and it was like looking where Kato was, and that was my dad jumping out to do anything to me to make sure I was ready. So
sounds like a great place.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
The only problem with that was because you were coming home at 3 or 4 in the morning.
Guilty.
Here, you know, and the first quote that I gave us when I started this off an hour and a half ago, the first book I referenced was Mr. Parker's printing of meaningful quotes from the teaching of Ed Parker, The Zen of Kenpo. The Zen of Kenpo, page 15. This was something that was referenced in our previous discussions, and it says the real truth for both lies in the moment of actual combat. The real truth lies in the moment of actual combat. And that was something that Mr. Planas brought up last time. So we will welcome Mr. Planas to the discussion. Hello, Mr. Planas. Welcome to.
Hello, Paul. Hello, everybody.
Anyway, so we're talking about the mindset of what's happening. Let's take away the school setting and get away from the sanctuary that a lot of people fall into. They feel comfortable, and we're in the real world now. So how do you help the students to understand? There was 2 other comments that are quotes that I used today. One of them was by Miyamoto Musashi on the difference between the bamboo sword and the real sword. Help us to understand the moment of truth in the real world.
Well, let me start out with if you cross-train, and many people are doing that now. It's something the old man wouldn't let happen back when he was still alive. I used to beg the old man to let some of these guys come in and teach our arts and stuff, and he wouldn't do it for various reasons. But I just relate to the Filipino arts. Once you study the knife systems or the blade systems, whatever, you get exposed to these techniques with a rubber or wooden, usually wooden knife. As soon as you understand it, they put that down and out comes the real knife. Now you have the chance of getting cut, and it's for real, and they show you it's sharp, because if you always train with rubber or wood, it doesn't phase you at all. But when a guy whips a real knife out on you in the street, you freak out. You freak out because you never faced one before. So again, that's what the old man called the moment of truth, and you've been saying that all night. And he used to say that all the time. Then you really see what you can do, can't do, and what works and what doesn't. And a lot of people out there are going to be in for a big surprise when they try to do some of the things they're doing the way they're doing it, with no pizzazz. I relate it to going in a gun shop and buying a gun. You go in there and buy a 44 Magnum that'll, drop an elephant, and they have. But you got a chance of loading it with blanks or loading it with real bullets. I can't load your gun for you. you don't have bullets, so your hands and feet have to be your bullets, and they got to be hard, fast, and frequent, and serious to drop somebody that's bigger than you. I mentioned that. I said, you know who we're fighting out there? We give him a name, the big bully, not the little bully, the big bully. He's bigger than you, so I said, figure that. He's going to be at least your size, but probably bigger. That's why he's called the big bully, and he loves to fight. He goes to church on Sunday to pick a fight, you know. And if you've never ever been in a fight and had to face that, you're going to be in for, again, a very big surprise. You know, that's why a lot of the old schools, you know, used to put you in make you go get a job in the local cut and punch in the bar to put in a bouncer situation to prove to yourself what you could and couldn't do. You know, but those days are long gone. It got my partner killed in the old Santa Ana clubhouse down in Orange County. But the other students of mine, do you think I should try that? I said, no, you're not ready. You're not ready. You'll get hurt real bad.
You know, it's funny you brought that up because the big bully always exists for our female students. Always. Yes. That is something we should examine when we're thinking of how to address this analytical study of motion. We should be thinking along the lines, we are female students, not male students. And if you do that, then you have a slight advantage on how to handle this this confrontation. You know, there was something that we were discussing earlier, and I'm not sure if you caught it. Are you familiar with the term, the web of knowledge?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I don't want to sneak anything on you. So Parker defines this, and he says, he looks at it. It's in page 68 of volume 5. I don't know what chapter it is, chapter something, 5. Anyway, he says he prioritizes these ideas, the degree of difficulty. Can you explain to us how you would identify these areas of attack? I've done that earlier, but I want to hear what you have to say in this. I mean, Parker lays out 9 of them, but I think of them in 3 sections, and I'm curious on your thoughts.
Well, first of all, you're talking about women now.
No, I'm just talking in general knowledge, the web of knowledge on how that applies to attacks.
Well, what I heard you come up with at first was the women thing, and I want to touch on that a little bit.
Go ahead. You can address that first. Go ahead.
Very few women really have an interest in learning this. We used to get so many calls, my husband's beating me or beating on me, and I want a quick crash course, overnight thing to teach me how to handle my, abusive husband. I said, it can't happen, lady. It doesn't work that way, and it takes a lot of sweat and time, and you can tell, I've said that before. I've been in schools where a girl will come in and she works real hard and she's got some pizzazz, and she's really trying. And I said, I bet that girl's had a problem. So I talked to him. I said, you ever been jumped or whatever? Yes, and it ain't going to happen again. I can tell. I can tell the way you're training. That doesn't happen with most people. Now, I'll give you another example. In 911, when the jets crashed into the Trade Center, one of my students in Texas was friends with the American Airlines flight attendant school. He got a hold of him and wanted him to put together a class for the flight attendants to take on these trained terrorists who kill people all the time for real, cut your head off just without even blinking an eye. And you know what they wanted for a class? 1 45-minute class. 1 45-minute class to teach these girls how to take on trained terrorists. Where is their head? It's unbelievable how people think about it. They treat the art like it's magic, or think it's magic. It takes a long time of sweat and a lot of hard work to make it where it's going to happen for you.
Okay, so
to be fair, the movies haven't helped us at all with that.
No, that's a fallacy. That's called instant karate. That doesn't work. Let's get it. So the point I was discussing earlier with Mr. Durgan, and we touched a little bit with a few of the other seniors that are on here. Under the web of knowledge, Parker defines it, which was something that I referenced to earlier on the Red Book. And in the Red Book, it categorized the different types of attack. And then in the student pamphlets that we were given for each belt, it listed out the basic fundamentals, self-defense techniques, and then freestyle. So I'm trying to dive into now the types of attacks that we may encounter. And they could fall into any of the three we got, you're looking at. So Parker lays it out, it grabs and tackles, pushes, punches, kicks, holds and hugs, chokes and locks, weapons, multiple attacks, combination of the above. So what I'm going to ask you, and I discussed this earlier with Mr. Durgan, and then Mr. Durgan can comment on it. I defined it, there was an intent to harm you. There was an action to show that the intent to harm you. And then there was contact with you. That's how I defined. Now, I didn't give them terms. I'm just saying I'm basing it on the actions of the assailant toward you. He's screaming at you, but if he's not within a zone that he's out of range, so to speak, it doesn't mean anything. It's like a barking dog on the other side of the fence. But if the dog gets on the other side of the fence, or you went into his yard to pick up the ball, now you're in an area that he can attack you. Now he starts to bark. Then he starts to come at you. There's his intent. And then hopefully he doesn't sink his teeth into you. So do you have any ideas, or as you would define those actions by your assailant?
Well, you pretty well know, and that's what you learn from bouncing. You learn who's mouth and who's not. And the quiet ones are the ones you have to worry about. They're the ones that walk up and just paste you. The guys with a lot of mouth usually won't do anything. They'll turn away if you stand up to them. So it teaches you to watch everybody. And most of the trouble we got was from the women, but that's the thing. But, the web of knowledge is not what a lot of people think it was. It used to be, years and years ago, you used to be able to buy them at gas stations. There was a wheel, and it had cutouts on it, all different places. And you put it on this where you're at now, and you'd read down here in these different cutouts where the next gas is and how many miles it is and all this kind of stuff. Remember those?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, well, that's basically what the web of knowledge was. It had techniques like grabs, and then you had right hand grab, whatever. They had all these things, and you read down through the list, and it would treat all these techniques the same. This was a grab, and then the technique, and you just shift it, move it a notch, then you go to a different one. You move it a notch, and you go to different. And then it's set up where you could teach over 2 years without ever repeating anything. See, and that was the old web of knowledge used to keep in the desk at Pasadena. Then one day I came to work and opened the drawer, and it was gone. I said, "What did you do with the web of knowledge?" He said, "I took it home." Took it home. Didn't say why. I said, "Okay, whatever."
Well, isn't that a way of categorizing the different types of attacks by putting?
Yeah, just like the forms do.
Right.
You have your 1s and 2s, your basics forms, and 3 start your technique forms, and techniques in 3 are all grabs. Attempted grab. People say did a lot of different things about it, but then you got to say why. Well, people say static weapon or dead attack. There's no such thing as a dead attack. And that's something the dead cannot attack you. See, so the hand had to get to you very much alive. And like some of the guys were saying, you're lucky it wasn't a punch or poke or something else, because it would have taken your teeth out. I say that all the time. I say, "Grab me," just to make a point. And they grab me. I said, "Wow, I'm glad that was a grab. That was a punch. You'd have taken my teeth out." So my problem is I broke a rule. See, I let the grab come in. He was too close to start with, like some of the guys were saying, and he grabbed me. And I didn't do anything about it. I waited to see if it was a grab. I do that all the time. I say, I put their mind in a set. I say, long kimono? Oh yeah, do it on me. And I go real slow, half speed, and I come in and I punch him in the mouth. And I punch him in the mouth. And I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "You punched me. You didn't grab." I said, "Yeah, when did you know I punched you?" "When you punched me." "That's right. And I came in slow, didn't I? Because you had long kimono in your head and you were waiting for me to grab." So the rule of motion is you treat everything like a punch. Don't let it get there. Don't let it get there, because it's much easier to prevent a grab than it is to break a grab. I show that all the time. You can just slap the hand away if they're trying to grab it. Like I beat my arm bloody one time because of my condition with my hands in Germany. I said, "I got here." I said, "Break my hand, break my hand off." He beat on my arm for 10 minutes. He couldn't get rid of my hand. See? Then I said, "Now grab me." He tried to grab it, slapped his hand down. See, it's much easier to prevent a grab than to break it. And that's after the fact also.
Again, I said this earlier, a punch is still a punch in English. Is it still the same thing in Japanese, Chinese, Latin, or sign language. So the term can be debated, and that's what we're here about. So we're trying to clean that up a little bit. I'm going to let the other guys explain that. But the idea of dead, live, semi-live, I heard that term used before, and the way I used it in this context, it had nothing to do with the attack. What it does with the attack, the person is intending, when he grabs you, that hand no longer is useful to the attacker. He's committed himself. And a counterpuncher, as Frank taught me, once he makes that commitment, you know what to do or how to respond, hopefully. Now, if you have to change it around, like you brought up in lone kimono, that's the equation formula. He grabs me with that, I know that other hand's coming. Because as Todd said to me earlier, he grabs with the one hand, that right hand is coming along, pal. And if you don't think that, mistake. Now, if he grabs me and I can't go to break, I promise you, I will change it in the equation formula, and I will change something around where the foot will end up breaking your kneecap, kicking to the groin, or stomping your hip or something. That's where it's going to go with me. Todd Durgan, help me with this. Explain how we can change these things and how they can work, because it seems we got a problem here. I like the idea of the web of knowledge, of helping us to categorize certain actions. They may not be perfect fit, but it's a general concept. And the divisions that we thought may fall in there. There might be more. There might be less. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I mean, when a person grabs me, first thing I know is where their hand is, so I don't have to worry about that one as much.
So is that a dead move?
In my opinion, it's now that hand is mostly dead. Yes, it has to reach
what he's done. Correct.
Right.
Okay.
He's already committed. So, but so is a push once it's made contact, because then it has to retract and go again. So I mean, but you know, you're splitting hairs at some point here. But I would agree that a grab is a dead move. Once it's grabbed, now it's dead, as long as it's hanging on. But it's only dead with regard that it can't punch you or hit you again. It can, however, pull and manipulate you.
Yeah, until he releases it, which either he voluntarily does it or involuntarily does because you just kicked him in the knee and broke his kneecap, and he's going to reach down for something. He's going to let go at that point.
Right. Now as Mr. Planas has said, that, you know, if I drop back and I do my blade, it's easier to avoid the grab in the beginning. Just don't let it come in. Don't let it grab you. But at some point you've missed something, as Mr. Seabrook said also. You know, you were in your dream world and somebody actually got the grab. Just because that happens, you know, delayed sword, for example, I don't teach that technique to actually break the arm off. I teach that technique to use sometimes, and it just depends, to use that inward block as a dimensional manipulation. So I'm going to change my opponent's posture, their mindset, or something with that inward block, as opposed to intending to clear that grab. Does that make sense? And then I'm going to go to my front kick and my outward hand sword and do all my other fancy Kenpo stuff. Dennis,
address that issue of the equation formula. Isn't that the part of Mr. Parker saying, hey, aren't we, we're modifying, deleting, adding, prefix, suffix, you know, insert, whatever, depending on how you, I mean, those are terms that Mr. Parker used to address the rearrangement. Your thoughts?
But the equation formula was spawned out of his original thing back some time ago, which was simply just the rearrangement concept, and that was it.
Explain the rearrangement concept for us that want to know what it means.
Well, it's any given base move that you had. You could, for example, delayed sword is a strike, kick, chop. You could kick, chop, and then knock the arm off. I mean, you could just rearrange the technique that you're doing or whatever you're doing. You could rearrange from. Typically, it's for teaching purposes. On the street, there is no rearrangement. There's only here and now. Here's what I'm doing. Which is hopefully a response from the skills that we've acquired from the training material. But as he's looked at the techniques and people are learning, too many people think that the sequential orders are the only way to do a technique on the street. And
is that the 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah. Yes. You know, if you ask Mr. Planas, you're going to do delayed sword on the street, he's going to say no. He says, I don't know what I'm going to do. I might do it, and I might not. It just all depends on numbers of factors: the environment, how big an opponent, where you're at, what you're doing. I mean, there's all kinds of things to put in play. But as a teaching drill, Mr. Parker said, look, don't get stuck on a particular order of techniques that we might be using to train. You can, and he created this equation formula. You can prefix a move, suffix a move, insert, rearrange, delete, alter, adjust, regulate. You know, you can do all these things and change the target, the weapon, or both. You know, there's just we have numbers of options, which then break into variable expansions. You know,
well, let me ask you this. Let me stop you there. Sorry to interrupt you because you're in thought. Do you find that the equation formula is the next level in the teaching of our students?
I don't know so much about a next level. I think it's just a point to, you know, mostly in my opinion, it can be taught at any level, but I mean, it's arranged for me at the orange belt level. At least it's mentioned in there, but you don't really utilize it greatly, in my opinion, till you're at you know, mid-level brown or actually black, where you're actually able to do the techniques and actually start expanding. Most of my focus on beginners is try to get the basic system down, because we want to get them coordinated enough to do anything. I tell the people all the time, you know, the main move, the main idea from all the material from white to black, initially, and the key word is initially, is coordination. If you don't have coordination, you're not going to be able to do delayed sword or anything else, because you're not coordinated enough to be able to get into a stance, to do a block, to do a strike, and much less to do a combination like 5 swords, dance of death, or any other technique. So coordination is critical. So
I'm sorry. I was going to say, every one of us here has some experience with running the line. I have to explain that to you. We had a problem. We go into a Friday night class. I used to go to Friday night class, and the seniors would be there. Roger Meadows, Jim Faria, lots of people showed up. And we'd run the line. They would actually run it old school, and then they would go through four. Okay? However, the problem is that we already knew the question before, so we already could have the answer, you know, with the execution of the punch. The problem is, Jamie, sir, should we not be focusing on just knowing what the questions are? Can we just say, we're going to do punch techniques, either left, right, or a combination? Wouldn't that be a smarter drill to train in or to expand on?
Yeah, I think when you get more experience, intermediate, advanced level training, you need that spontaneity. You know, like I said before, you know, I really feel like, you know, I don't know, you watch someone at a test and you say, oh, you know, he or she moves so good, but they should move really good. They knew what the attack was. You know, then the technique was called out, dance of death, 5 swords, scraping hoof, whatever it might be. It's all, you know what the person's going to do, and the person knows how you're going to respond, because you probably chose an uke that had experience in those techniques. Otherwise, you wouldn't have chose them. It's a good heart, you know, you'll have a good partner, it's hard to dance sort of thing. So I really feel like incorporating that spontaneity into it is so important. And the other piece too, that I really feel that, you know, as we grow in Kenpo, that we should, you know, give more attention to, is the real possibility of the fight being taken to the ground. So even in this stand-up, you know, freestyle sparring, you know, whether you're going, you know, at a low level pace or medium, or you're going for it, throwing some bombs, it's like, as soon as you get in close to the body, we talk about all the different ranges, but then we go, you know, we got to break away again, because the rule of the mindset of the stand-up is now we go back to 2 distance apart, a couple feet apart, and then we start sparring again. But the reality is that, you know, a bigger, stronger, heavier person, if they're able to get that close to you, you know, you can't just say, okay, let's break. And, you know, and one could say, well, you could still hit the person, but it's very difficult without having the proper travel behind the punch to deliver a good strike when the person's glued to your body. And, you know, and high likelihood you could be taken to the ground. So I do feel like more emphasis needs to be placed also on what to do if we're put on the ground. And not that I'm saying that we want to be there. Certainly multiple attackers, you know, we're dead meat. But if you're taken to the ground, you can't think that your Kenpo is going to work that great if it didn't work stand up, which is what it was meant for.
Well, the problem is that when we work in this, I'm going to Derek in a second, we're working with a compliant opponent.
Right.
Okay. Second thing, we are striking the individual with reservation. Okay. We're not really hurting him. Okay. Yeah. So let's get to the reality. Take away the bamboo sword. Let's go to the real knife. You grab me. This is going to happen, folks, like this. 1, 2, and boom. You don't have it. If he chokes you, you got 1, 2, and then you're out. Okay, that's what's going to happen. The other factor is if he grabs you and he takes you to the ground, you're adding to the equation an unknown factor. Is that ground hard? Is it soft? Is it dry? Is it wet? Is it even? Is it uneven? Am I dealing with a guy that knows ground fighting? Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you, you grab me, I'm going to blow your leg out. I know what's going to happen. You may hurt me, but you're not going to walk. And because I'm going to hit you that quick. But that goes back to the beginning of our discussion where we have to ask ourselves, environmental awareness. You walk in there like Opie Taylor, you know, I'm sorry, you're going to get your ass kicked. That's what Mr. Planas said. You better be aware what the hell's going on. It's the guy that you don't know that's going to come up and smack you. Okay? So there's a problem. We train sometimes with just bamboo swords, and that's not real. But then you get over with Derek, and Derek Hibben says, hey, you're at one of these concerts with me, and I throw you in the middle of that mess. That's called goulash.
Yeah, I like what Derek was saying, and Todd was talking about, you know, as you progress, a little stress so that you learn how to respond to these scenarios, like a little bit extra of a shove on the person, or maybe picking up the pace a little bit more in sparring, so you learn that level of emotional stress, so you learn how to respond a little bit more appropriately. And sorry, one more thing I got to say, Huck, I've been at a lot of your seminars over the years. It's been a while. It is so awesome having you on here. You're such a fountain of knowledge, and I really highly respect you.
Good to see you again too. I haven't seen you in a long time, boy.
Derek, you were going to make a comment. Then I'm going to go back to Durgan.
I just had a quick comment when we were talking about running a technique line. A whole lot of us that came up old school, I mean, we all had our version of a Friday night line, you know, whether it was a basement club or you were in Pasadena. And it takes me back to a thought to when we were at the homecoming camp in Pasadena, when Sigong LeBounty, rest in peace, he had us run the line and said, we have one move. That's it. They can throw whatever they want at you. You have one move, whether it's a block, strike, kick, or punch. You don't have the time to pull these multiple attacks or moves off. You got one shot, and that's it. And I saw so many red stripes, red bars, and tips humbled by being put in a situation where they didn't know what was coming at them. It made it real. He gave us that one shot, because in real life, that's what you get. And I think a whole lot of us, especially when running a technique line, we know that, hey, this is what's coming, and you can see it in the, like, 2 or 3 guys back. They're bouncing, they're like, oh, I can't wait to pull this off. And I for myself personally, I've been very blessed to have had guys like Martin Wheeler and Mark Waldron as training partners almost my entire life, that I go up to shake their hand and they go to punch me, you know, drop me in my nuts or hit me in the stomach, or, you know what I mean? Like nothing is ever like, you're always on your toes. The same with my dad. Me and my friends in even middle school and high school would be hanging out in my garage, just sitting there like this. He'd walk by and just cup check you. And those of you who came up old school knows what a cup check night is. Dropping a horse and see who's wearing one. My dad was really good at that.
You know, it's funny you say that. I forgot the cup check with my son. Going back to Todd, talking about.
I know what it's like being come out with a live blade by Huck 2 in the shop. He'll walk past you with a sharp knife and try to stick you just to see if you're on your toes.
Todd, we're talking about contract penetration, contact manipulation. Let's get into something like that. We're in that close proximity. We're grabbing. Help me with that. Understand that.
Well, so yeah, but once you get into contact manipulation, now you're talking about something's already happening, right? Now you're either on the ground or they're trying to choke you or they're trying to grab you to throw you or something like that. But, or with any luck and a lot of skill and a lot of practice, you've got a joint lock in the process with them. You know, once penetration happens, that means that they've thrown the punch and you have either blocked it, stepped to the side, used your angle of departure and all that other cool lingo to avoid, and you're now moving toward them, closing that range and getting into manipulating them, either throwing them, choking them, putting a lock on or something like that. And this is where.
Does this address the equation formula concept?
I mean, I think that, does it address the equation formula? No. Does the equation formula address this? Yes.
Good. Thank you for clearing that out.
You know, but Mr. Conatser had mentioned variable expansion earlier, talking about getting into variable expansion. The equation formula is a training tool, no different than delayed sword or short form 3. It's a tool to help train and understand, you know, what the possibilities are. Variable expansion is the now. That's what that, and I'm pretty sure Mr. Conatser was going to get into that.
So why don't you give us just a basic definition on that, and I'll throw it over to Mr. Conatser.
Well, I mean, variable expansion, you're without limit ultimately, and you can move in any direction. You know, I don't want to cross over with gaseous expansion, but so you're able to in a live situation move through the equation formula, picking, plucking, using, choosing, and executing anything that's needed or necessary to succeed.
Mr. Conatser, walk us through variable expansion.
Well, you know, variable expansion is just, you know, simply taking a particular move or moves and just expanding it to many more. For example, I tell people, okay, we're going to do delayed sword. You need to show me 25 variables off of that.
Is that something along the extensions?
No.
Okay.
You could turn them into an extension, but no, these are just things that they need to come up with. For example, strike, chop, front kick. Well, instead of a front kick, do a side kick or a knife edge. Instead of a chop, do a back knuckle. So in other words, you know, alter the technique somehow, and basically it's delayed sword, but the same type of attack and, you know, front grab, but you're going to do something in a variation.
Do you prefer variable expansion over extensions?
No, extensions are just another, you know, set of prearranged moves, whereas variable expansion, I don't make people memorize variable expansions. We just play with them and kind of use them as options for fun, just to show a student what you could do here and how not to get stuck in the old to symbolic systematic technique.
So when you consider it to be, if you were to use it in a music context, the extensions would be the written music. The variable expansion would be more the freestyle or improvising. Correct, Mr. Planas?
Expansion.
It's freestyle, isn't it?
Yeah, well, no. It's still totally different. But just like Dennis said, like you take delayed sword. Okay. Well, the Tracy system did that. Hey, I can block, I can chop. I can block, I can back knuckle. I can block, I can heel pound. I can block, I can hammer fist. I can block, I can thumb him in the eye or thumb knuckle. See, it's just altering the weapon. That's all it is. The same block and strike, same path, same angles, just different weapons. And that's what you learn in the forms. You know, you start off like we were talking in doing the forms thing. You start off with a closed fist, and you go to open hand, and you start closing it. You know, and all showing all the different things you can do with that hand. Yeah. But then the extension is past the base move. Like it's 1, 2, 3 is the base move. Well, extend it. Go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever you want to do. That's extending it. Extension.
So
it's past the base move.
Is the extension part of the expansion?
It can have that in it, but it's really different because, you know, you're limited.
How is it different? I'm confused.
Well, you go block, kick, chop.
Okay.
Okay, you're going to go block, kick, chop again? No.
Yeah, you
say,
could.
hey,
if you had to, might be on somebody else.
What
Could be on somebody else.
You're learning how to move. You go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So okay, when I block, kick, chop, okay, I can reload the hand and cock it, break a rule, cock is a separate move, and then back knuckle or whatever. And that's techniques like long kimono do. They show you when you're working one-handed that you have to reload and recock it. But if I go block, kick, chop, then I come in with an elbow, and then poke him in the eye with it, and then you go back in with an outward elbow. That's all different weapons. And going from where I was or point of origin, or I realize, and that's what we say, your last strike wherever you stop is loaded to do something else. And that's a rule of motion in Kenpo. You never just hit or block, you block and cock, or hit and cock to strike. And when I strike there, now what can I do from that point? And that's why the method of execution, the angle of execution is done in the base moves to where it is. This slice is chopped. Put your hand low at the bottom corner, 730, 430, whatever you want to call it. That's where generally where your next shot's going to come from, and it does when you learn the extension. You don't have to add distance and time to the technique to do that. You're in position for that.
You at one time were a very well-known, respected, proficient musician. So when they would give you an opportunity to play cutting heads, which is a slang word for improvising, you read what was happening with the music. If it was a slow tune, medium tune, fast tune, and you would fit appropriately the response. If you were, say, playing with another guitarist and he was doing Eddie Van Halen with lots of notes, you might counter that. Instead of trying to do that with him, you would probably do what B.B. King would do.
Yeah, just pull a BB. I'd pull a BB on him. That's right.
Yeah, and pull a BB, and everybody go, "Oh my God!"
Yeah,
it's not what you play; it's
BB,
what you don't play, folks.
Yeah, BB
so here's
did more
the deal.
with 4 notes than Van Halen did with 75 notes. Yeah.
You know, I grew up. I grew up with the Van Halen groups and all that stuff, and worked with BB. And BB told me one time, he says, "Oh, I don't know that much." And I said, "Well, you've forgotten more than most. I'll tell you that much." You know, I mean, a style. He based it. He said to me, "You don't always shout. Sometimes you whisper. And remember who your audience is. If it's a guy and you're having fun and say I'm hanging out with Derek and we're having some drinks and I'm sitting and Huck is there and he gets out the guitar and he's just, just tearing it up. But then a girl walks in and he say, hold on. He goes into a nice, soft, flamenco type style of guitar and the girls, ooh, because why? His audience changed, the response changed. So if that's the case, Dennis Conatser, what do we look for in adapting? Because we have the base move, as Mr. Planas says, you have the inward block, the strike, and the punch, okay? How, we're looking at, do we do this? If we see that as our base move, do we change it and say simultaneous, let's block and strike? Or let's block and kick? How do we, is that what we're looking to, is that what variable expansion is enabling us to think, to do, to change the response?
Exactly. I mean, variable expansion is, altering what you're doing, whereas extensions are continuing the flow of a particular pattern so that you keep moving through something. Mr. Parker didn't particularly like the one punch, one kill type thing with the Japanese. So he went more with a Chinese idea where if that one punch, one kill didn't work, you don't want to be stopped dead in your tracks. You want her to be able to be experienced enough to be able to pick up and continue on, from that environment. The idea is not to take, a technique like clutching feathers and then add another 10 moves on it. We shouldn't be extending techniques. We should be shortening techniques.
Why is that? Why is that, Dennis? Mr. Planas agreed. Why is that, Dennis?
Well, I mean, sit there and if you're doing a song and dance on a guy, you're doing 5, 6, 7, 8 moves. What that says is that your first moves did not work, and you have to keep going and trying to go to the well to try to pull something out that does, rather than making that first move like Mr. LeBounty did, and coming up under Mr. LeBounty. It's like, I've been in those kind of classes where he puts you on the spot, and you got one move. Here comes a technique line, and you got one move. We're not going to do delayed sword, 5 sword. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to say you're on the street, being a cop. He knew that, and he told me many stories of him in action, that he was on the street, and he, which we all respect and love, and he's a tough man and all that kind of thing, but rest his soul. But he also told me, man, it got a lot harder when I was out there. I hit this guy and it didn't work. He might have been high. He might have been stronger. I didn't hit him just right. Whatever the reason, you need to be more accurate. I mean, the techniques we have are drills to develop skills, but you got to learn to develop those skills strong, and you got to develop them against, adversaries that are not just pushovers or compliant. They are and on the street, a lot of people are non-compliant. They're not just going to let you, push them over.
Well, the problem I'm seeing right off the bat, going back to the wooden sword versus the real sword formula. Think about that, guys. We get complacent. Yeah, we'll just do 5 swords and we run the line like we do on Friday night. And I would do drills with Frank, and I'm going to throw this right at Mr. Planas. Mr. Planas, do you remember Bull in the Ring?
Bull in the Ring.
Yeah, where are you? Are you still there, sir? I lost
you. I'm here.
Somehow I
You
lost.
talking about the ring? You talking about the Ring of Fire, or there's many names for it. We put you out there in a circle and point to people, and they come in to attack you.
Yes.
Yeah.
You didn't know what was going to happen is what it basically got down to. Frank called it Bull in the Ring.
No, you didn't know. You didn't know. You didn't know who he was going to point to, and you didn't know what they were coming in with.
Right.
That's the old way of testing. I tell people that a lot of times. I said, back in the old days, pre-60s or late 50s, early 60s, whatever, when you took a test, you only had to do 6 techniques. 6 techniques in the Ring of Fire. The old man would point to somebody coming at you, but here's the problem, or the hard part. You couldn't repeat a technique. If you did 5 swords on the first guy, you couldn't do 5 swords on the other 5. You had to do different techniques. And if you could do that, you're pretty home free. Yeah.
Derek, you were going to say something, and I'm sorry. What were you going to say, sir?
I was going to touch on just to make reference to the musical aspect that you were talking. I grew up too in the era of the Van Halen, not Van Hagar, speed metal type of thing.
Shredding.
Oh yeah, I am a shredder. I play 6, 7, 8 string guitars, but also having Uncle Huck around and even Uncle Frank and guys like it always reminds me and humbles me to what Clapton said this. Not only did Clapton say this, but I think he was the first one to say it, was, I am not the fastest player. And B.B. King has said this too. He's been quoted. And so is David Gilmour. I may not be able to play the fastest, relaying that to our hands, but every note I play counts. Every note I play counts, and every note I hit is perfect and resonates. That holds way more, and you feel more in here, and it gives you the goosies and makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up than somebody just playing flash and showing off, and somebody playing slap themselves than it does somebody actually making their counts and strikes hit and matter. That's all I had to say.
Shredding is one facet, okay? And we see that a lot, Todd, in a lot of online examples of people doing techniques with compliant, partners, and you'll see a lot of speed, and we see them beating each other up. And they get through the whole technique, and you go, look at this, and you go, oh my God. That's like watching this guy shred up and down, up and down. But the question is, can you sing that solo melodically? Is it melodic? Can you sing? I mean, there's got to be songs. Big band is great example of something that swings. You'll hear that melody, and they will play it. In the Mood is a good example. Okay? Well, there's songs that I've heard that, by rock players today. And that's the thing. You have to listen, you have to think, and you have to feel. What's the problem with all this speed business?
Where do we start?
You start wherever you like.
Most of them, most of the time, they can't function properly with basics. So what happens is they try to cover it up with some speed. And so all is lost, literally all is lost in that. And that means that they have no bass, no power, no accuracy, no timing. They sound great and look great, or to somebody, I guess. And, the rest of it is, basically history, because when they walk away from that guy that just let them slap them a bunch of times, that's the only guy that's ever going to do that.
It's funny, Mr. Parker says it right here in 5. He says reinforcing ingredients when he talks about the speed. And he talks about we're in this mindset referring to do it now. I want it done this instant. Be prompt, be better, be fast, be quick about it. You must do it rapidly. Where's the substance?
But speed should be relative to the necessity, right? You can't be faster than your opponent's reaction, okay? I mean, you can be, but then you throw yourself out of orbit of the interaction with that person. Okay, any of the techniques, you look at the techniques, and a lot of times if you're not allowing a reaction, first of all, if you hit somebody so hard they start to vomit and you're moving in on them to throat chop them, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get a taste of some nasty ass vomit. Pardon my language. Okay, so you gotta, your speed is great. Be fast, but it's got to be coupled.
Her name is Reagan.
It's got to be coupled with all of the other elements that are important and vital to the proper execution. So anyway.
Well, again, it goes back to the bamboo sword versus the real sword. You watch it and they're going, we see that all the time. We see it in the form. We've discussed that in the art of the forms, Kenpo style. Mr. Planas mentioned the speed thing. Come on. You guys go so fast that they think speed equates good. When I was growing up, and I'll turn this over a second, sir. When I was playing in a couple of production shows, they had a tendency to play fast and loud. And I said, wait a second, where's the melody and where's the space? Because usually it covered up the mistakes of the person. Go really fast. Everybody thinks you're good. What's wrong with that, Mr. Planas?
I was going to say something else about your speed thing. What I do, I see somebody's a speed demon, like there's a speed man out there. Everybody knows who that is. It used to teach somebody, hit somebody 20 times in a second or whatever. I said, you can't do that. It's impossible. You can touch them, but you can't hit them. See, so I said, okay, I see somebody whipping off 5 swords in a blink of an eye or whatever. I said, come over here. Walk them over to the heavy bag. I said, I want you to hit this bag one time good and hard enough to hurt somebody. And they go, wow. I said, good. Now hit it twice. Blam, blam. I said, good. Now hit it 3 times. Blam, blam, blam. I said, you realize how long it took you to hit that bag hard 3 times? And you did 5 swords in a fraction of that, in less than one of those hits? Are you hitting or are you touching? It's not magic. It's not magic. It takes pizzazz. Lots of power. I related to a boxer. A boxer walks in a boxing gym day one, gets on the heavy bag, and learns how to develop power and body mechanics. Look, you're going to be hitting somebody, you're going to be taking hits, and you're going to put this guy on his butt as fast as you can. So you better learn how to hit hard, not fan the air.
One of my drills that I like to focus in on is that I'll work on with my students is this. It's simple. Is that I focus in on the power drills, as Mr. Planas was saying. I'll work the heavy bag, the 100-pound, and just see if I can move that thing. And then I'll put combinations to it and try to work it as Frank taught me. At the same time, besides hitting the bag and being linear, I would also be circular, coming off with the counter punches, going around, hitting. I'm doing that right now with my microphone. Then I'll go over to Century Bob. And what will I do with Bob? I'll work speed. Because why? I don't have that resistance like I do with a 100-pound bag. It's like, holy mackerel. So I'll, and then I try to use a nice balance. So it's sort of like music. If you have, a lot of you know the songs. If you have a Johnny B. Good lick, where the guy's going, there are double eights, okay? And he does them with their double stops, 2 notes at the same time. So he's going ba-da-da, 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 ba-da-da. He's hitting these double stops. And then you'll hear he'll play 1 note and just hit a B and hold it. The greatest examples of that are saxophone players. Horn players can only play 1 note at a time. So if they want to sound melodic, they'll make sure it flows and it fits into the openings that the music sets up. Kenpo is musical. It really is. Feeling, timing, tempo, positional, whatnot. You look at that and you go, okay, how do I deal with that? And I look at somebody like Jamie and I say, Jamie, let's be musical on the mat. So you're going to be there. If you watch a great boxers, and I used to go with Frank and the other guys, we'd go over on his house on the fight night. And you see, you know, Sugar Ray or Hearns or, you know, Duran, you know, fight. You know, and you'd watch them and they'd be setting their timing. The great fighters like that, because the big guys fight, it was rare to see them throw a lot of multiple combinations like you do in the middleweight and lightweights, okay? I mean, you see Sugar Ray, and, you know, it really was exciting when you see him and he counter Hearns, and all of a sudden you see him go with his arms, right? A buzzsaw effect. Now, I don't know how effective that was, but I don't doubt very much it hurt when he hit you. But effectiveness there. So the timing, the musical, the openings, how do you address that? What do you do about speed? What do you worry about in power? Don't you address those issues? What's your thought?
These are great questions. I mean, the way I look at it is, you know, Muhammad Ali really had a jab and a cross. You know, Mike Tyson had a hook punch and an uppercut. A lot. The point is these powerful strikes, like Huck was saying on the heavy bag, is a whole different ball game than being a speed demon going as fast as you could. It's a funny story. I have a long 6 I did back in 2006 in Baltimore, and it's on YouTube, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it because I went so fast, and I won first place with it. But you know, and I look back on it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, the technique isn't there. Slow the hell down. So I do feel like you know, slow to learn, slow to forget, fast to learn, fast to forget. Don't worry about speed. Speed is a byproduct of training properly and regularly and frequently. And, you know, if you view the forms / katas as you know, rules and principles of motion, as opposed to, you know, you have 2 minutes and it's a tournament and you have a stopwatch, you know, if you view them as rules and principles of motion and not as a fight scenario, take your time. Make sure your basics, define your movement really good. Speed will just come over time through training properly.
You know, it's funny you said that earlier. Mr. Parker, yeah, I think Conatser said something about Mr. Parker with one strike, 1 kill. I defer to Kill the Golden Goose on that one, folks. Go to Chuck. Chuck, how do you do a blend between those two, between power and speed? How do you work those?
Okay, well, what I've been thinking of is somebody might have brought up the word, but timing. Speed is important, but the timing is even more importanter. There's a, Ed Parker, through his teachings, I have learned that to beat an action is to meet that action. And we've talked about that too in this seminar, is the best way to avoid, to beat the grab is not to let the grab happen. To beat that action, meet that action. So the timing goes into that. And as far as practicing and the speed and the timing, I agree wholeheartedly with Jamie that if you can't do it slow, you can't do it fast.
Sure. Let's go to Dennis Conatser. Dennis, I referenced a couple of my drills that I work on that Frank wanted me to work on was, obviously everything was footwork, most importantly with him, angles, and counter punching and whatnot. But we worked on power, as I told you, hitting a 100-pound bag for about at least a minute. I don't know about you, but my arms want to fall off. You're really trying to hit that sucker. Okay. And then you push it up to 3 minutes. Okay. Like in a round, which I never want to be able to do, because I don't know about you guys, but if it's going longer than 3 minutes, then we're into the scene from The Quiet Man, and we'll have to take a break and have a pint. Okay. So, sir, how do you address those things with trying to have an even balance between power and speed?
Well, I'd just like to go back just for a second before I say that to Chuck. Mr. Parker used to say, to beat it, you meet it, or eat it. So he'd add that on the
slang here.
That saying. So that just reminded me of that when he said that. But working the techniques, it is a humbling experience when you go in the bag and you time somebody for a minute. And they say, look, I want you to really hit the bag, not just touch the bag, but hit the bag and hit it hard. And if you do that, even for 1 minute, you might get 100 shots in, but you're going to be, conditioning is one of our fallacies, that we don't have enough conditioning, to do. So the biggest time the conditioning happened was probably when you're younger. Us older guys don't do it near as much, on a regular basis. And again, take my hat off to Chuck Sullivan at 84 years old. I've watched him work
88.
88 years. Okay. Sorry. I was giving him a break.
Right. It looks like he's about 68. What are you talking
He's
about?
out there working the bag, and it's impressive, but
yeah,
you say blow it up to 3 minutes, and it's like, oh my God,
that doesn't happen every week. I'll tell you right now.
I want to see Derek do that on a regular basis every night. We'll do it for 2 minutes and 3 minutes and 7 minutes.
Derek does it all the time. What are you talking about? I've seen him. He practices those Led Zeppelin drum solos forever.
He'll put on some steel music and
John Bonham. He's in there beating right. That's
he's ready to go out there. He's ready to go out there and get in the mash pit.
But we do. I was like, I remember I was with a Van Halen concert. Okay. Talking with David and Alex. And I remember I was with Alex in Pasadena, and Frank introduced me to him, and he says, oh, this is Alex Van Halen. You might know him from a band called Van Halen. I said, oh yeah, I love your music. And he said, well, yeah, I want to train with Mr. Trejo, be like you guys. And I said, really? What's that? What does that mean? I'm waiting for the answer. And
Alex Van Halen, you said?
Van Halen. Alex Van Halen.
Okay.
He's the drummer. Okay. His brother is Eddie Van Halen, who just passed away.
Eddie's brother.
Yeah, Eddie's brother. So Alex goes, yeah, I want to work on my eye-hand coordination. And I'm thinking, and Huck will appreciate this. I said, what the hell are you doing in here? That's not what you want to do with your hands. You need them. You start banging those suckers up, and all of a sudden you got broken fingers maybe because you did something wrong, or your wrist. I mean, you need all that for the dexterity. So if you need that, maybe you should work on something else, like go slow and do Tai Chi with your Kenpo, So those are, anyway, we have gone, folks, 2.5 hours. This is a long time here. Okay, a lot of material, and it's going to be, I'll have to cut this up into 2 pieces because there's no way, I might even cut this into 3 so that we'll talk for another 10 minutes to make it an even 2.5 hours. Well, it's 2 hours and 26 minutes. So I'll give myself a little bit on that. So let's do some conclusions on this. So what is our takeaway from the analytical study of motion, Mr. Conatser?
Well, I think it's something that everybody needs to examine and understand that there's,
What do you mean examine?
Well, should be able to look at the different techniques and how the whole system's set up with direction and method, path, dimension, and angle, and how all these things are incorporated in whatever techniques we do. There's angles, there's dimensions, there's targets, there's weapons, there's both, and so studying the motion, those are things that are necessary. The ranges or dimensions a lot of times, and I might add that, there's height, width, depth, and obscurity. I might mention to Todd, the obscurity is a visual perception. The others are physical perceptions. You got height, width, depth, and we have, of course, breakdowns of those. So many height zones, so many width zones, so many depth zones. But the obscure zones are merely our visual perception of what we cannot see, or I should say what we can or cannot see. But the obscurity is ones that we can't specifically. We have kind of this hourglass perceptual view that goes panoramic around, but when we get to the end of our vision, that's all there is. Everything that we cannot see is our obscurity, and that's where we can be attacked from behind or whatever. So it's something to take in consideration when we're looking at where the other ones are, more laid out.
Mr. Durgan, what's our takeaway from this discussion here on the analytical study of motion? What's our takeaway from today?
Well, I think that the biggest takeaway needs to be, and okay, I'm not going to argue with you, Mr. Conatser, on obscurity. You have yours and I got mine. Do what you want with it. I think the most important thing there, though, is that, Mr. Conatser, is that we at least acknowledge and recognize it and place it somewhere in the curriculum, in the teaching, so on and so forth. The analytical study of motion is, for all intents and purposes, simply a tool used to better understand, like Mr. Conatser was saying, the way the system was put together, and some of the alternatives to some techniques, and some alternatives to other techniques with regard to direction, dimension, angle, etc. So it's another great teaching tool. It's another great way to understand, and as it states in the name, analyze motion and the study of motion that Mr. Parker gave to us.
Derek Hibben, what is our takeaway from today? What is your takeaway from today?
Takeaway from today. Touched on a lot of subjects. The main one is self-reflection. Also, be humble. Practice, be diligent in your movement. Make sure that every strike counts. Basics. If you're not teaching a basics class or working on your fundamentals or basics, do so. And I'm beyond humbled to be a part of this group and even be acknowledged. And all my love and respect to the seniors. And Paul, thank you for your time and your platform.
Thank you, Derek. It was so good of you to be here. Give my best to your parents. Chuck.
Always.
Chuck, what's your takeaway from today?
Well, we started out, some way said it, learn it, drill it, forget it. Muscle memory is very important. Perfect practice makes perfect. And we talked about it, we danced around it a lot, but that's my takeaway. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Jamie, I'm going to you. Let's dispose of the bamboo sword and use the real one. Tell me, what is your takeaway from today?
I love everyone's response so far. I really appreciate what Derek had said. basics and humility. I'm a really firm believer that the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. And it's so easy to go up the ladder and think, I have the answers to this and I have the answers to that. But the reality is that there's so much more out there. And as soon as you feel like you know everything, in my opinion, it's time to humble yourself and get back to your basics and realize this is a journey for life. And humility, basics, they're foundation of everything.
Let's go over a few more people here. Let's get into it. Todd, I already asked you. Chuck, I've got you. Let's go down. Mr. Planas, I'm going to you. What is our takeaway from today? Are you still there, sir?
Unmute. Am I unmuted?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I don't know where to start, but I'll just say this, that some people don't want to learn very much. I tell people, I don't know anybody that doesn't want to learn everything they can, as much about this art as they can. I was doing a seminar in Spain a few years ago, and I was doing some bass moves, just simple 1, 2, 3, 4 bass moves, and I snuck a knee into a technique. I think it was like clipping the storm or clipping the land. I don't remember. But one of the guys came up to me and he says, Mr. Planas, that's your question? I said, sure. He said, the technique, there's no knee in it. I said, yeah, I know, I added it. He said, well, we only want to do what's in the book. I said, what? He says, we only want to do what's in the book. I says, well, Mr. Parker had saying, like, don't be wasteful. If you see that you can put this knee, you got to step through anyway, that you can go ahead and use that. Don't be wasteful. Well, we only want to do what's in the book. So I told him, I said, well, okay, well, let me tell you something. You are doing what's in the book. You ever heard the term, the 7 things you do to add, alter, insert, prefix, suffix, rearrange, delete? No, well, that's in the book too. And that's what we're doing. See, so you are doing what's in the book. We don't want to do what's in the book. It's treated like a Bible has to be done exactly as written and no other way. And those people aren't ever going to learn it.
Thank you, Mr. Planas. I'm going to end it now, and I'm going to quote, again, I started off today's discussion on Mr. Parker's book, The Zen of Kenpo. And I'm going to quote 2 parts when he talks about combat wisdom. The object in combat is not to injure yourself, but your opponent. The object in combat is not to injure yourself, but your opponent. In other words, get real, folks. Remember that wooden bamboo sword? False sense there. Reality needs to be checked with occasionally the real item. And the alternative, the only other thing he said, which I believe in, fight or flee. Fight or flee. Both quotes, pages 18 and 19 from this book. Again, thank you very much. It's been an honor to be with everyone here. You've been an amazing group. Thank you so very much. God bless y'all. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. So we'll be having fun, but I wish you all the very, very best. Continue success. Without further ado, I would like to say Derek Hibben, Richard Planas, Todd Durgan, Jamie Seabrook, Cal, Dennis Conatser, Jeff Earl, Todd, I got you in there, Todd Durgan, I did there, Bob White, and everyone else that came on here. Thank you so much. Have a great night. God bless you. Good night.